out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going all right.
What's on your mind?
Oh, I don't know. All sorts of fun things.
Yeah, me too. It's we made it to June. We're recording this on June 3rd. I'm looking at what we watched last week and thinking that feels like a long time ago.
What the hell?
We've had a lot happen.
Yeah, you could say that.
We're in the midst, not just quarantine, but worldwide, including plenty of local protests.
Mm-hmm.
We sit amongst of. That's where we're at. If this is also a snapshot of where we're at, but I gotta tell you, Tim, it felt it was hard to sit down and just like, that's the wrong word, as if I'm, I did not feel in the mood to just hit play on this movie, as escapism.
Yeah, me neither.
I've only felt like I can do right now is just try to soak in black art and media in a way that, I haven't done as, dedicated. I've done it dedicated before, but not from a certain lens I want to again. Mm-hmm. So just to put on this Jake Gyllenhaal movie. Yeah, it felt weird. Luckily, as far as, hey, if we're here and have a job to do, it was diverse enough of a film I could get into it.
Okay. Was it? I guess it. Slightly.
I mean, as far as we'll get to it, the film, but the only real character I was super into was a woman of color.
Yeah.
And I don't think that has to do with, the lens I'm watching it now, but just the movie. So since I was plugged into that story most of all when watching it at least at least I could pay attention to the film when watching it, but
I had a hard time.
Yeah.
I mean, not just because of my own focus, but just because who the fuck cares about this movie?
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, it feels weird to be sitting down and doing this at all, but it's we're doing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a thing we do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you want to tell people what this is?
Yeah, we're getting to that. Hey. And what are we here? This is not the Midnight Gospel. This is Tim and Ryan's gospel at any time of day. That's called Dismembering Horror. This is actually episode 95, getting up there, of our podcast show, Dismembering Horror, where we talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything we found interesting or noteworthy about a film deemed a horror film by us.
Yeah, or by somebody else, and then we can totally disagree with them.
Or yeah, exactly. And we're on a quest to see what we haven't, to revisit what we have, and we feel that horror is a tackleable genre worth discussing, both in fun and in meaning, as far as the films, what they contain.
Usually.
Right, and if they don't, we talk about why.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
And that is often, can be just as fruitful in a different way. And actually, this film's kind of is on point for allowing discussion for something we kind of talk about as far as like the place of negative critique in art. I'm glad we'll be able to get into that via this story. Great. That's our show.
Yeah.
And we start off, Tim, if you're ready to do it, you got nothing else you want to say with a trailer for this week's film. Great. All right. Well, this week's film was actually submitted to us by our dear friend, Max. Hello, Max, if you're listening.
Hi, Max.
And it is a relatively recent film from the beginning of 2019, a Netflix-funded production. It is called, and I will use this to transition to our trailer, Velvet Buzzsaw.
I'm hoping you find something to explain what's happening.
Which one's better, 1 or 2? Better, worse, no different.
No different.
I'm quite curious to know what you think.
I think sober hasn't been good for him.
Pierce was in the full bloom of alcoholism here.
Exactly.
Never should have quit drinking.
No originality. No courage. My opinion.
I can't save you.
I found something.
Who did these? Mesmeric.
A guy upstairs, he died.
And you just took them.
He had no family or friends.
I can make you rich.
So, but here's the thing, like, with this movie, I think part of why the trailer kind of shows you all the, effectively, the main important beats is because everything else in between those beats is nothing, like, in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing to pull from outside of these really specific heightened moments.
Yeah.
And I guess you could make that argument for anything, but in a way, but like the distance between things that are worth looking at in scene to scene in this movie versus like the quote unquote big moments like a death or a fight are just nothing moments. In my mind,
there was enough, I think, like, I feel like you could have taken like the lead up to the painting moving for the first time and just kind of, okay, it's a story. This woman who like finds all these weird paintings in someone's house, and we know there's something weird about them, and set up this idea that maybe there's something else to them, and kind of, you know, set up some of the character and flavor.
Yes, definitely.
Like, and then just not show all the stuff that made the movie stand out to me.
Right. Oh well. Well, what did you think?
So it was interesting watching this. Like, I went from kind of being like intrigued at the beginning to like kind of not knowing what I felt about it. But like, as I get, maybe I probably could have felt totally different had I seen the trailer and just not been into it. But I mean, as soon as the first like horror thing happens, of which I know I loved, which is like the monkey arms coming out of the painting and killing the guy, I was like, okay, now I'm sitting up in my seat. And then so all the horror aspects I was like really clinging to, as far as just, this is something that's doing something more unique and interesting than most of the stuff that we watch. So for that, I mean, just as like, I had enough like issues with it. And I don't know, in the end, that I don't want to say it's like a great movie. And I feel like I could really fluctuate how I feel, like, as it could get better or worse the more I think about it. But I think for the aspects that were working, it was all different and interesting enough. I gave it as high as I rent it.
Wow. You know,
and you want to avoid it.
No, I wouldn't avoid it. It's not, it's not the worst thing ever. But I didn't like it. I'll tell you that much. like, I would stream it. I did stream it. I was fine with that. I was just so kind of disinterested. And maybe that partially is just circumstantial. But there are just too many problems for my taste in the movie to give it a rent. And, you know, that's a lot of those problems for me. I try to not be overly subjective, you know, like I think that there are borderline objective things that I'm like, that's not how you tell a good story. So, you know, that just doesn't, you know, reach the level of like worthwhileness for me, because it's like, dude, I mean, just a very simple example of things. I as you know, there are certain logic things that drive me nuts when you just sort of skate by them, and you can skate by them if like the result is worthwhile. But like when you use the lack of logic to get a result story-wise, like just for effect, essentially, that really pisses me off, because I'm like, dude, there's a better solution, and then you didn't ignore a logic thing. Like, just fucking, like, be a good filmmaker. I'll give you an example. When the dude is driving, that you're mentioning, with the monkey guy, and he drops his cigarette in his lap, he doesn't just stop the car. Nothing is forcing him to keep driving, right? Like, he's burning. Stop the car and get the fuck out, right? That's the most logical thing you could do. Okay, so if that doesn't get you, story-wise, to where you want it to get you, we're already dealing with supernatural. Just add one little beat where he tries to pump the brakes and nothing happens. It's I don't know, 20 frames of a shot that you need, and we get it. That's enough. Yeah. That's enough. Then we don't go, hey, why don't you just stop the car?
Right.
So that kind of thing just, it drives me completely crazy.
It's funny you say that, because like I think I guess my in summary, like what didn't work is could be put as like, just make it an hour and a half movie instead of a 2-hour movie. And I think like the kind of like logic things that you hold on to, I'm not as susceptible to. Like that goes out the window for me if there are enough scenes where I'm just kind of tuning out or think it's not being like honed the way it should. Like I think there could have been a strong enough tonality that comes through this that would have sort of, I guess, tonally, stylistically justified like that scene that you described, had they risen to the top amongst kind of just this, some of the more like, I guess what I think were unnecessary scenes.
Yeah.
But we're already kind of getting into it. So should we get into it more? And
well, okay, so let's summarize it, right?
Yeah. Names. We got Morph, we got Rodera, we got Gretchen, Josefina, these names. Coco, Damrish, Bryson, and John Malkovich as peers.
Right. Yes.
And what was the name of the artist that we follow, or the whose artwork? Dees, yeah. I mean, I kind of just looked at it as the story through, even though it wasn't it, but through Josefina's eyes, who's the character. She's like at the lower rung of this Los Angeles rich art. They aren't dealers. They're, what are they called? Like agency?
I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. Purveyors, art agency. But like the kind of the very like despicably high society kind.
Sure. That's a good way to put it.
So we have Josefina. She's kind of on the bottom rung of it all, and like her boss, played by Rene Russo, Redora Hayes, is kind of like mad at her for showing up late. And so when
General performance.
when Josefina finds from her deceased neighbor that he had this collection of amazing artwork, kind of very dark, brooding artwork, Redora finds out about that. Redora is basically like, well, you can't make money off this all on your own. There's so much work for you to do. So how about we work together? And then Josefina kind of sells herself out, so to speak. And that's kind of like what I'd say is kind of the more, turning point, inciting incident moment when that catapults all this, what we learn to be literal cursed artwork, out into the art world.
Right.
And then we have it's and this is kind of what didn't work for me, but it's presented as kind of an ensemble film, kind of more so than it should be. And so you have Jake Gyllenhaal is Morph Van de Walt, who's like a kind of stuffy critic. Rene Russo, as I already described her, and Toni Collette, Gretchen. I don't even remember.
See, I mean, you can't even define any of the characters. That's a problem.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think I could have defined them better if there had been less of them.
Yeah.
And that's something I want to get into more later too.
But ultimately, what is the story? The story is that the cursed paintings, everybody's greedy for the cursed paintings, and then the paintings effectively start killing them off.
Yeah.
That's it.
Through cool, cursed ways. Painting ways.
I'd say
come on,
50-50.
I thought that's what you would have loved about. That's what made this movie a rent it for me, was the kills, like the horror stuff. Nope. I was only thinking of you during the painting scene, her big death, like the paint getting on her skin.
I mean, it looked cool, but
man, this is what happens when we
didn't get there for me.
When we don't watch them together. See, now rather than having like actual Tim not freak out during that, I had like imaginary Tim in my head who I know loves body horror going like, oh, which is what I was doing.
No. Well,
all right.
Paint's not scary.
Yeah, but your skin like changing color.
That I agree with, but the performance and the depiction didn't make me feel like she was scared. Get it off me. Get it off.
That was not that.
Yes, it was. What is that? Why am I covered in paint? I
guess she was played up as kind of like cool, stern girl a little too much. Yeah.
Let's just try and barrel through, because all I want to talk about is things that didn't work.
All right. Well, then I'll try to get out of the way for us our first section. It's known as, here we go, What Worked.
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Well, as I said, just like the horror angle of it, that's what worked for me, of like, if you had so much kind of, not bizarre, just unique, stylistic choices. I don't know. But I thought it was cool how when it comes down to it, though, you're still following like that horror formula of evil thing, whether it's a killer or whatever, it starts killing people off and then culminates in some, even more killing people off. And we have people along the way kind of either just surviving or trying to put together whatever the mystery is. And so I pretty early on like recognized what was wrong for me, as far as just wanting it to be honed more to like just that story happening.
Yeah.
So when it was happening, I just kind of like tuned in and was enjoying it, and it wasn't. I was just like tuning out, probably missing exposition along the way. But
yeah, I could see that.
But I mean,
cursed things are cool.
Yeah.
right? And I love a mystery. Let's go search for the answer to the mystery. That's cool. Art is cool, or can be. Like the whole just broad idea of like what is art and what constitutes good art. Like that is age-old debate, you know, and I think an interesting one. And there's lots of really great stories about that.
Right.
And
I liked
mean,
on
there's
top of
historically amazing real things in real life that have happened either between artists or between artists and critics or between the general public and critics about art. And like that whole dynamic of like how deep that goes in history, I think is really fertile ground to pull from. And I think these characters are at least an attempt at representation of that thing.
Yeah.
Without going on.
What I tuned into, what stood out to me thematically that I enjoyed even more than that specific theme was just the idea of kind of like art appreciation versus exploitation. Yeah. In that line. Like I ended up really liking Rene Russo's arc for that reason, of someone who's just kind of represents in the mode of like treating art as product and something to be sold and
commerce,
disconnected. Yeah. And like she has up one of the paintings in her room kind of almost more just because she can. And I just thought that this was such a good example of like how horror can be used, where you just take something and twist it up a notch in the direction of horror to like really get at a lot of cool meaning behind it. Like to have her, because basically it tied together this idea of like if art is magic and art as magic, basically, like, you know, having, you know, just in terms of like when we hear the word magic, we think so just like hocus pocus, literal like spells and stuff. But what it really means, or how I think of it, is like this painting casts a spell over you. Yeah, you know, that's what it means. And so to have her, Rene Russo's character, be so disconnected from that she is then, that personal choice comes down to her is like, okay, well, there's a report that these things have curses. I'm either going to choose to believe that's all hogwash, or is it going to get to me? So to see that, like, then getting to her and be her demise, like, that was cool.
Well, especially when you think about somebody, a character like her, you know, who's so wrapped up in appearance and sort of this culture around it, or presumed culture around like how to be. Just to imagine her using the term hogwash really seals it for me.
Yeah, right. So then, though, we talked about, you know, there's if there's the theme of criticism and how we're appreciating art, I really liked where those themes intersected, as far as the idea of a negative review being like a curse or a hex on an artist or a piece of art. And that was embodied for me. I loved, just again, because of those ideas, I loved it once we got to that scene with Jake Gyllenhaal hearing, like he goes in to see a whale audio installation, right? He not knowing what it is, and instead he hears his own negative criticisms coming out at him. And you can just feel it's, you know, it's just pure meanness, anger, you know, that kind of thing coming from it. And just to have that mirrored right back at him, that was really cool.
Yep, I agree.
Something you could only do in a horror movie, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, the basic construct of a critic having the things he criticized sort of turn back on him, and the idea of like, what do you call it when you're sort of devoid of feeling or empathy?
Narcissistic.
He's just, no, it's sort of like callousness, I guess. Yeah. Of criticism, especially in the art world, can be very like make or break, right? Like in a lot of ways that person often holds so much power that, like, in the most extreme version and how they sort of depict it here, it's like he literally holds people's lives in his hands by his criticism.
Yeah.
You know, and he can he's making or breaking somebody's life. And so that's a really cool kind of place to go exploring, and to see that character have to go through the realization of what they do and how it affects people and come to terms with that in some way. Now, we kind of get that. I don't think it's full in this movie. It's not. I don't think it reaches the level that, let's say, if Jake Gyllenhaal was very specifically the main character and this was his story, I think there's more to just explore and to get to within this story. But that's not how this movie is constructed. Yeah. So it's sort of we get like maybe 40% of what that would be if he was specifically the main character. But the effect, when you, like, it's a good construct. The effect that you could, that realization and that devolving as you see the error of your ways, so to speak, as that type of character into madness is really, I mean, I think that's for me, probably the most interesting thing in this movie to hang your hat on. Josefina's character arc. If Josefina and Jake Gyllenhaal were the same character, if they had made them one character, I think that I'd be in. I think. Yeah. But they're not, so it
that would have been, yeah, that could have been cool.
But like that whole thing of, like, I mean, I get it. There's all sorts of reasons why this movie doesn't do that. So that's not a criticism at all. But I think that there's really good strength in those two characters, and in a way, it's like you got to choose which one is the movie.
Right. Well, what's cool about his how do you just frame it as him
like
getting over his issues or whatever,
coming to terms at least,
coming to terms with his issues. Well, what I see, I mean, this can be for anyone and for their issues, but, you know, in terms of criticism, what was interesting is, like, you can still be, a lot of times, like, being flawed. It's because you are attaching yourself to a truth without a bigger perspective. So it's cool to hear him say that truth that he connects himself to is something we say on the show about how we justify, you know, having a what did not work section, which he says during it. It's like, in order to, you know, move art forward and sort of, in a certain sense, you know, you say what's working and what doesn't.
Right.
But then he's sort of used that truth to justify a kind of very unsympathetic nature of how he approaches it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like he's gotten to it. What is this? He's become too wrapped up in the things that aren't important, which is like his status and sort of his persona, like, in that world. And, like, it's an interesting, he by far is the most interesting character to me, because, like, even from the onset, his identity is cracking right away, right? Like, we meet him, and we learn almost immediately that he has a boyfriend, but in spite of that, he's enamored with Josefina, and then they start a relationship. So right away, like, they are cracking a construct of who this character is right away, right? Like, the cliche would be, oh, he's a flamboyant, affluent, gay art critic, and that's a that's a really standard cliche, right? Like it's just a thing that people, like, in lesser hands, they would just make him that, right? And they wouldn't go any further. They'd just be like, yeah, he's gay and you know, he's a bitchy queen critic. It's like, ugh, okay, lame. So I like that they they play off that cliche and they sort of say, actually, he's pretty complex because he's even that identity that he has at least put out there to some of the world. There are cracks in that, and he doesn't, like, there's a really good line about, like, Josefina he says something about, like, I'm confused, and she's like, that's a horrible place for a critic to be. And, like, that's great. That's good. Like, that's where I feel like the movie is doing its best stuff, like, especially the writing. Because there's a lot of writing that, like, I think maybe just is too, maybe I'm just dumb, right? Like, it's like for an audience, and it's like, it's maybe too smart in a way for me. I don't know about anybody else, but, like, it's too inside of that world, and maybe I'm missing the things that are said because I'm like, yeah, I'm not that affluent, pretentious, whatever world of like high art. I don't really know it. I've been around people like that, and I've been like, I gotta go. So I just go. Like, I don't know it well enough. But so there were times when I was like, I almost feel like this is too heady for me. Like, it's just too insular. And maybe I'm missing something, but maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the point. So, like, it's sort of working in that respect. I don't know.
Well, I want to touch on that when we get to what did not work. I think that falls under for me. As far as this more, I guess, bigger things to get out of the way, I mean, maybe, it didn't seem like you did, but I just loved all the horror death moments. Yeah, Josefina getting, like, the paint up her skin in this very, like, hallucinatory way. Cool. And then her end fate becoming, like, part of a graffiti wall somewhere. Yeah. And then Redora was Toni Collette's character getting her arm. Yeah. I love it. Her arm chewed off by the Sphere, which is an art installation that senses what you want to feel, I guess. Right. Or like something like that. No, Redora's Rene Russo. I made the mistake. I think I said Redora gets her arm chopped off. It's Gretchen is Toni Collette's character. Yeah. And then, so lastly, then my other great kill was Redora getting her titular tattoo, velvet buzzsaw of the band she used to be in, rotating and activating on her neck and chopping off, doing what a little buzzsaw would do if it was on the back of your neck. Yeah, I like the idea. Oh, and then like, of course, the execution of the visual. Yeah, for sure. And I like, that the lead up moment to that I thought was quite cool. With, her taking the pose effectively of the painting that she turns around in her bedroom. Oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, yeah. Hell yeah, yeah. So remember, she's in bed and she can't sleep or whatever, and she's looking at the fairly big painting in her room, and it's a woman, like, sort of silhouette shadow, sitting on the ground, and her cat is next to her, and then two shadows are coming in from the right, and she gets in exactly that positioning right before the buzzsaw takes over, after she's gotten rid of all of the art in the place, which, that's a cool sort of, like,
you got all the, it's Twilight Zone, right? It's like you got all the art out, but you forgot the tattoo. But you forgot the tattoo.
Kind of like a Qui-Gon. Forget to paint the ears.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's all cool.
Dude, but then the monkey painting. Oh my God, that was so good. Of course, that's my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. I even with that one, I think I wanted more. Like, do we ever find that guy's body or anything? No.
I don't know, but I mean, come on, like it's the first time, like, and it's like a painting has just moved for the first time kind of subtly, and then we have that. It was just like such a cool shock and finally cemented it as far as like, oh, this is how this is a horror movie. This is the horror angle of it. Like this can happen. That was just the moment where I was like in it, was as soon as that monkey painting death happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I really do like the basic idea of this art will kill you, or that art will kill you. 'Cause oh God, it's really hard not to just be like, yeah, but what the fuck?
Well, hold those thoughts.
Because, well, just the one thing I'm just realizing, like, it's not. So what is the curse, right? Because it's not just these paintings that are killing people. Because other artwork kills people.
It's if you possess the paintings, then they kind of put some kind of curse or hex on you that then enables art to reach you this way.
Yeah. But is there an actual act that like triggers it beyond? Is it more complex than just the act of possessing it? Is it like, or is it less? Like, it's obviously it's not just looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise people, all sorts of people would be dying. And it's not that you own it, because like that guy, the guy in the truck, he doesn't own it, but he's planning to steal it. He's planning to own it. I mean, this is why it's muddy for me, but I would love to be able to say what it is and then say that worked.
For me, I think what it was for me, and what did work, and I think, again, it would have been clear if it had been honed, but it comes down to the line that was in the trailer of, if you look at it long enough, it starts to move.
Yeah.
Like, and that's sort of in the, you dwell on it long enough, you think about it enough, it gives it power. And that was my take on it.
Right. And this sort of the hypnotizing aspect of it. 'Cause it's like, it seems like everybody is hypnotized by it. It's that compelling. And that's cool, because I think art in particular has, like you were saying, that the magic of, or the magicalness of art really does have this, like, you can, and we do, sit and just stare at a thing. Right. And I like that line, it's that very classic, but on point here of, it's at the art show, and just two people on as an aside, we see, what do you think it means? Well, how does it make you feel? Yeah. It's like that idea of, it's that idea too, that connects to that idea that's set up at the beginning of why I think that sphere is there. Like art, good art, it will give you the thing you need, you didn't know you wanted, kind of filtered through subliminal interpretation more so, or just kind of unconscious communication. Well, so yeah, like what's cool about that is that is the mirror to Morph's character. Right? That is the pure version of enjoying art and having a subjective attitude about it. right?
Right.
You're
that's
literally just allowing the art to have an effect on you, and you're walking away with that effect without any sort of value judgment. You're just saying, this is how it made me feel. That's as pure as you can get. Morph is he's effectively, at least in the beginning of the movie, the exact opposite of that, which is I deem like I'm the authority on value of this art. And that, I think, is actually one of the cooler sort of debates that we can have, because it's like, we do it all the time on this show, right? Like, there are people that absolutely love The Conjuring and the Insidious movies. Mm-hmm. It does purely what they want it to do for them. Mm-hmm. And that's great. Good for them. We then sit here and we go, yeah, but it's trash. Right? But it's that is the debate.
Right.
And like, and then, why you even have the conversation. I'm not trying to get people who like the thing to not like the thing. You know what I mean? I'm just saying it does not make me feel good. So I'm trying to bridge the gap between the pure version of it and a, you know, quote unquote expert critique.
Yeah.
And totally. With the hopes that you could do things that will make it, well, better in my mind, I guess. So take that for what it's worth.
Right. And then it filters through us differently, where maybe we can latch on to what works, what in theory could work about The Conjurings for us.
Right.
And then make it work for both us and the people who like those as they are.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple episodes ago too, where it's like you start to see this funneling of what is actually great over time.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, a really cool thing. I mean, I guess, the famous anecdote is always using Van Gogh as that example, right? Like, that not particularly successful in his lifetime, but, we all kind of think his shit is amazing.
Right. Totally. Yes, agreed. So I just want to get back to, I didn't actually get to what I was trying to get to as far as the meaning of like art giving you the thing that you need that you don't know what you need, and then tying that to like your question about, well, what exactly is the method of killing? Well, I think that it was the method of killing in the end, like as far as it's the idea that's set up with the sphere is it's kind of we see that it's specific enough to the person at a time. Like it will meld to get its desired effect. So that's just why it can be like being grabbed and taken into the painting. It's why you can be like the paint coming off and getting on your skin, or like, all the different ways it kills people.
This has just made me realize that, don't get me wrong. Like this writer director he's very, very smart and very specific and like goes super, super deep. And like there's a video essay on character, his depiction of character in Nightcrawler that is, I watched it and I was like, holy fuck. Like,
is there from our friends beyond the screenplay again?
I don't remember who did it.
They did a Nightcrawler.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. It's either him or that guy, Patrick Willems. Yeah, it's one of them. But I watched it and I kind of went, holy shit, this dude's thinking about things like so many layers deep that like that's pretty brilliant. But if nobody like the question becomes to me, is it for people that aren't intellectually understanding how deep it's layered, are they still getting something out of that, even on some sort of subconscious level. I don't know the answer to that, but my hope is always that the answer is yes, but I don't know.
Right. It's just way more effective. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
But, what I was getting at is that as you're saying this about the kills, I'm realizing that like each of the ways they die is very, very specific to their character flaw, or like the lie that they have been telling themselves. Right. So let's go through them really quick. I think going backwards too might help. Rene Russo's character was a punk rock, like widely considered one of the sort of purest forms of art in a lot of ways, right? Like punk rock is just like pure fucking expression at its best. That's like what you're going for. And she has become so antithetical to that thing. And the only thing left of that person she was is this tattoo.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that kills her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. That makes so much sense. Like I kind of got it in the moment, but I didn't go, ooh. And the reason I didn't go, ooh, is because it didn't seem like anybody else really had that deeply layered of a death. But now that I think about it, I think it is true, right? Like Morph's death is the animatronic thing. And I quite like that death, right?
Of course, me too.
How can you
Didn't
not?
mention it yet. I forgot to mention that one, yeah.
And what it's pointing at is his flaw, right? Like we've sort of said, he deems his opinion as sort of the end all be all, and he at the very beginning of the movie says that's just bullshit, rehash, whatever, and he's not looking at it for what it is. And I think if I sat down and spent some more time really, really like hashing out his character and like going down that rabbit hole, you would see all of the connections to why he needed to be killed by that specific thing, that specific piece of art, right? Josefina's death, you could kind of say the same thing, right? She in her desire to become more like Rene Russo and be this high-powered art person, dealer, whatever, she's kind of turned away from what maybe, and this might be problematic if you think of it in this way, but maybe from her quote unquote roots of more of an urban sort of thing, right? Which I sadly think that that's what they were saying, and I think it's a little bit on the nose and kind of like lame to be like, oh, the one person of color in here, her roots were in urban art. And it's like, okay, it's a bit of a cliche, but go for it. But that's what happens, right? Like graffiti art, the thing that she's saying is trash is the thing that gets her. Cool. Okay. So that one works too. The guy who gets hung by the tie, I'm not sure. Like, I don't really know. I like that death, though.
I mean, you could just say a tie is kind of emblematic of like masculine fastidiousness and kind of like adherence to everything. I don't know, like everything that we see is wrong with his character.
Well, and also there's something to the location, like the actual exhibit that he dies within is like a over-cluttered, old, dusty attic. So it's sort of like, I think the metaphor is, I don't know exactly. It's like he's a collector of other people's shit.
Well, it's also just like that kind of his clean office, compared to, we all have our attic space too, if we try to present ourselves as just having this, kind of other aesthetic.
Right. Yeah. So there's something that one seems pretty thin, but that one has something. His character is pretty thin too. And the actor's thin. Hey.
Honestly, though, it's like you'd say thin, but I had a very clear fix on like kind of who he was.
No,
like,
yeah,
you know.
no, that's true. What I mean is he's not super fleshed out, right? Like we don't get a lot of him. That's all I mean.
Which is, I think, what worked about his character in this film.
Yeah, right. And then who else? Gretchen. That one I think makes a lot of sense. Like she's always trying to physically grab other people's shit for her benefit, and she gets her arm taken off. Like I get it. Cool. So I guess this is all to say. I think there's one other, but the monkeys. So the monkey one seems a little on the nose too to me. It's sort of like this guy's issue is that he's like, you know, I'm not just like a repairman. I'm not just a dancing monkey kind of thing, right? Like he kind of he keeps making that comment, like, you know, I'm an artist too. Right? Like he's making a bit of a joke out of himself, and I think having, you know, monkeys who in that painting as well, like 3 monkeys kind of playing around, it makes sense, right? I like all that. Like I think that's smart and that's cool. But it feels out of reach a little bit.
And we'll get to it, but it's because there's other things in the way.
But I really admire the depth and the thought that goes into being like, let's make this meaningful. Even if it is out of reach for some people. I mean, that's a different debate. But I think that I admire going that deep. I think that's always good to strive for that. Because there's times when they don't, and we talk about that shit a lot. They meaning filmmakers, just in general. We see that a lot where they go, yeah, whatever, or they don't have a point of view, or they just don't bother to do their work.
Right, and that's another reason. That's another reason I think why I could, you know, ended up putting this as high as a rent for me is because as long as a movie, if there are those moments that are doing that I can tune into, it's gonna have that potential to make it to a rent versus a stream for me typically.
Now, there's also the only other really big thing I have as what worked is it's double-sided, unfortunately, like a lot of the things, but there are moments of shot composition in this that are really, really feel like art, you know, like really cool composition art that I'd be like, if that were a painting or if that were a photograph on my wall, I'd be like, hell yeah, that's cool. And I like looking at it. That exists in this movie. So that when it happened, I felt like it was working a lot.
Yeah. Kind of, this is more than just as far as, I guess this includes kind of visual touches, but for me, like one of my favorite things in films, and this is also kind of like why films like Beetlejuice, Pee-wee's Big Adventure are my favorite movies, are anything that kind of feels like it's a unique, like, style world building touch. I kind of just have to give examples to like define what I mean, but like you have this sort of like shot reverse shot of like a unique looking cat looking at koi in a koi pond.
That's one of the best shots in the whole movie.
Right?
Cutting to that cat, like in close up looking down into the pond, is the best shot.
And that's kind of indicative overall what's working for me, where it's like the film was working when, because you have it set in like the quote unquote real world, like it's Los Angeles, and it's kind of, you know, it's always riding this line of how much are they a person versus a stereotype, whatever. So it was working for me more when it got pushed on that edge of like whatever that kind of style, those stylistic touches were, as far as, again, just building a world. So like that shot reverse shot, the cat, I know the logic around it you didn't like, but just the visual and the happenstance of when the guy sets his shirt on fire, his lap on fire, like, I feel like it's happened, and, you know, I've maybe seen it like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I don't know,
Big
but
Lebowski.
Big Lebowski. Yeah. Just that visual though. It's like, I don't know. It's still fun. It's still novel enough of like that reaching a point where like we see someone in the front driver's seat, like fully inflamed. Like loved that. I actually really love there is a realism to that moment where he didn't just like burst into flame and like then you cut to like a stuntman in a flame bodysuit completely engulfed like running through the forest. Like he pulled the burning shirt off of him and then the burns were appropriate. You know, it wasn't like his whole body was burnt. It's like he was burnt where the shirt got burnt and then he pulled it off of him. Like that, I was like, that's real. That feels very much like how it would probably go. Yeah. Yeah, and just felt like true to the tone and humor that was working in this film, as far as like that touch getting his shirt on fire and everything you just said. And then the one that kind of I think made me sit up early on and kind of like, you know, pay attention to this movie a bit before the horror stuff started happening was when they were presenting that sphere and describing it at the beginning, and you're just kind of like, what is this? And it's like, as under the exposition we see different people trying it and their like reactions that they're getting when they have their hand in the sphere, and it's just like you have this one guy just give this kind of like just some kind of like little funny specific thing, and it like while underneath the exposition you're hearing, and just that kind of just, I don't know, that's what was really working for me in this movie. Stuff like that. Little world building style touches. I agree. It's limited. There are moments of it that I think are really great. For example, it was almost really amazing to me, and it didn't quite hit, but like close, when the dude who gets hung or hanged, I think is the proper way to say that. He walks into the exhibit and it feels very much like an exhibit. Like it feels like the walls are essentially painted, like it's a faux thing. And it transitions into being much more a real attic. And that, I love that kind of stuff. It's same thing kind of happens with Josefina, where she's standing in front of the mural, and then we kind of start to pan around her and we see that the mural is changing into an actual like gallery. Mm-hmm. And that morphing moment, just the way that the camera moves and the walls are kind of pulling apart, because we're realizing perspective wise that it's a different thing. It's not just a flat wall. I love that stuff. Like, it's so pleasing to me when you mess with people's perspective and you do a thing where, like, you know, I mean, you use this all the time in sort of, it's an illusion. Optical illusions just please me a lot. And like, this is where you do it, right? In a movie about art, use optical illusions as much as you can, because it's about the visual medium, and like, what we're seeing matters. And I love that. And I just wish there was more of it, or that it was more like a part of the horror visuals. Like, it's there, but I wanted more. So like, I commend the stuff that is there for sure. Maybe this is kind of like what you're saying, but I defined it as like self-aware gags almost, but like when we had the art installation of hyper realistic looking people, and my God, it tilts up and we see it is just a set, and like and the people aren't even real, but we're looking at it for a sec thinking this looks totally real, both the people and the set, and then it's revealed it's like she's giving critiques on the lighting from up above and we see there's no ceiling, and then similarly to that was like when this is that classic thing where we think we're hearing non-diegetic music and it's this harp music, and then we see it's actually the wind blowing through this harp thing. Yeah. I like that. No, I mean, there's definitely cool stuff. There's really cool design stuff. Well, on the design stuff, I just got to get out of the way. I loved the paintings themselves. I thought were incredible. Too. Yeah, they really nailed that. Like, whoever they
got to to be the D's
Yeah.
was fucking great.
Again, like the movie kind of hinges on that working in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that element was there. It makes me sad, you know, we'll get into that it wasn't able to elevate as much as it could. But yeah, just the paintings themselves. So awesome. Bought into their, the power of their mystique. I liked the little, it's just now lesser things, but just little touches. I love that. It was funny. You had Coco, like the young secretary type.
I love that she just keeps finding dead bodies.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The fact that she's the one who keeps finding dead bodies.
And the last one, she's just like had it. She's just like, come on.
Well, that's the one where I forget if it's the last one, but I mean, where it's just the one that's so extreme, where the museum opens at the Sphere and people think it's an art installation, and you have the little kids stepping in the blood, and then she discovers it.
Yeah. Man.
Fun little gag. And then I gotta say, we'll just repeat something I said. I think the way beginning was just being reminded. I think this was helpful for me and like my own work, where I love stuff, you know, that sort of, and I can get so focused on kind of the stylistic things, the unique things, like all the things that I think are more interesting, but then how you can just make these ideas punch through so much more when you hang them on kind of core genre tenets. So that's what I was just saying, as far as that, it was following a formula of, you know, these, it's kills, and then it's just sort of the story surrounding that. So just to say that again, that did it was a good lesson reminder. And then lastly for me is just bringing back John Malkovich at the way end, and that is kind of not only like probably the better example of kind of where I wanted maybe all the, you know, more of the characters at, was kind of the level John Malkovich, his character, was in it, where he wasn't in it too much and left at a certain point, and it just made it all that much more impactful when we cut back to him at the sort of as like a cut to credits sequence, basically.
It's like a coda.
Yeah, a little coda where we're like, oh yeah, he went off, and we remember Rene Russo's advice to him of paint something that's just for your, or, you know, until you make something that's just for yourself. And then it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, it's so obvious, but in like its meaning, you know, it's so unambiguous, but because it just like, it just works as a punchline, it just makes me happy and is clear. And like, of course, it's the sand mandala. If you want to do something that's only for you, make it something that's temporary. And then that just got me into my own, you know, fun, deeper meaning of like looking at myself and making art and being like, well, when it's hard, it's stuff we all know and thought about before. It was just a reminder. But like, yeah, we get so caught up on maybe it's difficult to work because you have this feeling that it's going to be this way forever, you know? But then I think it's the healthy approach is no, this is not going to be here forever. Like in the actual scheme of things, zoom out a little further. Right. Your art is very temporary, just as you are.
Yeah. Yeah, so you might as well make it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, another just nice reminder too for me of like where I can, like, I know it's my tendency where I love and much prefer kind of things that are more, you know, not so clear cut in their meaning and like thematic telling. So just a reminder of that, like, yeah, since I shy away from things that are unambiguous, this is a good reminder of just like, oh, when it can work for me, just when it kind of punches in a certain fun wrapping up, you know, ties it together way. Yeah, great.
Cool.
All right. Now what we've been saying we're going to get to this whole time, we'll get into it now. Here it is. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
So I feel, everything, hearing you talk about it, Tim, we were saying like, oh yeah, that actually like in there, that was working for me. But I really just feel like I mean, I want to hear your other reasons for it, but for me at least, I agree. And just if it had just been cut and honed to have that expediency that Nightcrawler had, let's say.
Nightcrawler is about one guy.
Right.
It's very much about one guy.
So you're even talking about like those horror moments and like kind of the meaning of, how they were tied to the characters and what each of their specific character deaths were. Like, even if kind of extraneous character stuff was cut that we aren't into or whatever, I think those characters really would have been honed more. Those kills, they just would have had more impact in themselves. Like everything that was working just would have been, I don't know, when I read everyone's negative reviews and hearing what you say about it, I really think just make it an 1.5 hour movie and not a 2 hour movie. Focus on, like, I think I get excited about your version saying combine the two characters, but if not that, have, what's her face, Josefina be the main character and maybe Jake Gyllenhaal be kind of like the B character and that sort of romance be like the B story.
I think you can go either way, but yeah.
Yeah. And then everyone else, like when it was just a scene of like, okay, Toni Collette's talking to John Malkovich, I'm just like not listening,
Not at all. Like, here's the thing. I just had this thought.
I know they're great, but like, yeah.
Right. Okay, follow me around the block with this one. Jake Gyllenhaal's character is predicated on authority of what's good. But he is not an artist. So if you make him the main character and you make him the person who finds the D's paintings, he should believe that he knows what's good, but finding them and figuring out what to do with them becomes the question and the problem. And what I think that ultimately would do is it would make the movie about somebody's conflict of self. Do I actually know what is good art? Right? And, initially, if we play out the way this movie plays out in the same way, initially he would be validated right away. Everybody would be like, as they are in the movie, holy shit, this is amazing. Like, objectively, everybody loves this thing, and it would validate his core belief in himself. But because things start to fall apart, people start to die around him, the art is not making him, it's making him feel confused and conflicted and whatever. That becomes a metaphor for confidence in your identity, and his in particular of I'm the authority on what's good art. And in this case, it would become more of what is the word good in that art becomes not good as in people like it, good as in good versus evil.
Yeah.
And that becomes the sin, right? Like that, if you start to roll down the hill with that, I think you really, really have something to hold on to as an audience. Even subtextually, you go, I know what I'm feeling, and I know the problem that this guy has now. And it's a big problem because his whole life is predicated on being the authority, and that is falling apart. He has to reassess his entire identity and the value, not only in what he says, but in how he feels about himself. And then we have a character arc that we can get behind, and we can see where it goes. And then we can see the problems with how he's lived his life and how it has affected other people, because this becomes a macro version of that. He said this thing was good, and it is killing people. He's used to, it's a really nice dichotomy, because he's used to saying things are bad, and that's killing people. And that gets flipped on its head. And then we have a fucking movie, and we have a character to latch onto and somewhere to go. And he should be the last person to fucking die. Not Rene Russo. Who gives a fuck? Why is she the last person to die?
I'll tell you why, Tim. I'll tell you why, because the filmmaker's approach to this, he was quoted as saying in talking about this movie before it was actually made, describing it as something that was like an Altman-esque The Player. Okay. I think he just, I
get it.
Hear me out. I think that was just something that he was fixed on, but then was not the right, and that's not the version of what this movie should have been for making it the best movie it could have been and what it's trying to be. Yeah. Like, I don't know why necessarily that approach to this story, but I just really got the sense that if he sort of went in with this kind of vision and then didn't let go to it. Because even like what I keep saying about just trimming it, cutting it, like when you're talking about earlier, how there are moments where there, as you put it, like art world talk that you just kind of felt like over your head or not into it. I don't think that's so much about like your ability to follow it, but less that those were just scenes that were only doing one thing. Yeah,
yes.
And that's what kind of made me tune. I actually compared it to this movie, What Wasn't Working for Me, kind of those like the, Shane Black at his most Shane Black, where he's just kind of, you're kind of just like, yeah, I get it, dude. Like, where it's just, once we cut away from the action and are just like, they talk for about a minute too long about whatever's going on. And it's like, that can work. It's
self-indulgent, I guess, I think is maybe a way to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Which is then so funny when you look at like, how does Quentin Tarantino make it work? I started thinking about that. And I think because there's these really big underlying points of suspense that are in the film that are going on.
That's actually a really good point, because I think that question comes up a lot, and people think that what Tarantino is doing is just writing a lot of dialogue, and that's what it's about. It's about, like, that's his style, right? A lot of dialogue scenes. And, like, it's all about the writing. No, like, that's not his strength. His strength is writing a bunch of dialogue, exactly like you're saying, in the midst of underlying issues that we have to wait to get to through the dialogue. We have to see how it's going to play out, and it's literally the exact same thing as Alfred Hitchcock showing you that there's a bomb under the desk and then spending the next 8 minutes of the movie with characters talking and standing around the desk. We go, fuck, when is that bomb going to go off? Right? That's a very, very strong way to write.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the bomb, I don't care about your fucking art conversation.
It felt like kind of like just switch gears, but to make an overall point of what's going on here, I think is the Shane Black movie. It's had to have been him, if not similar filmmaker, but The Nice Guys.
Yeah, that's
Russell Crowe. Yeah. Where like I was actually pretty into it, but then there are these moments where like it was the two of them and like talking to like one of their daughters or the character's daughters, and it just felt like, this is in here because Shane Black just like loves all these actors and just watching them do their thing. But it's like, I feel like you're really, unless there's that deeper thing going on, you're kind of almost maybe allowed like one of those in these kinds of movies to kind of just kind of like, okay, we've earned this kind of breather moment. But here in like Velvet Buzzsaw and more moments, and that example, it just ends up detracting. Like, it really feels like for me that the filmmaker, what was his name? Dan Gilroy. Dan, I'm excited for you too, that you got to have John Malkovich and Rene Russo, who's your wife, and all these people working for you, and they're awesome, and Toni Collette, and they're all great. But it doesn't mean that their scenes like that aren't doing more than one thing have to go in the movie. Or at least it's not this movie for me. Like, this is when it comes down to horror, it is horror, and like edit for that.
Yeah. It really jumps out at me as you're saying this too. If you're going to make an ensemble, and I'd have to go watch other ensemble things, because they're like just off the top of my head, I'd need to look at this particular point to see if it's true.
Boogie Nights.
Right. So great. Yeah. Good example. Boogie Nights. In any given scene in Boogie Nights, there are multiple characters having multiple experiences and conversations. Like we're on a ride. And actually, that's a fucking really good example because I think I spent most of this movie wanting that. I wanted this movie, I would say 80% of it is two people dialogue scenes. And they are shot almost exclusively in two ways. All of them tend to use this formula. You start with the two characters either static or already walking, one or the other. Let's say we do the static one. Within the scene, you go shot, reverse shot, reverse shot. There's no master. It's just shot, reverse shot, back and forth. And then at a certain point in the scene, one or both of them moves across camera. They do a do-si-do, and then the camera follows them into a new location or a new positioning. The reverse is true. A bunch of times you start a scene with two people already moving. They walk through an environment, they land, and then we get shot, reverse shot for the rest of the scene. And maybe you punch in on them as the scene gets sort of to the point of the scene, whatever the conversation is, you move in on them. That is really, really formulaic filmmaking. And part of it is how it's edited. Right? Like, they may have shot other stuff, but it is edited within those confines. And it actually made me feel like they had to rush this edit. Like, they needed to finish the movie. They were on a timeline or something, and they just were like, but bang it out.
I could see that. It had a Sundance premiere, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a major problem with that because it just becomes two people talking. And to your point about ensemble, like if you have all these great characters, how many 3 or 4 person scenes are there in the movie? And how many of those 3 or 4 person scenes actually utilize all of the best, like, well-known actors in this movie? Not very many. There's a really good 3-person scene between Gretchen and 2 people we never see again, where she comes in and she's trying to sell them on her new buyer or whatever it's called, the person that she's started working for. And they have a pretty cool dynamic where it's like, it's a bit of a power struggle, and they end it with her being like, kisses, but they're like, fuck you. There's something actually going on in that scene for one thing, but like there's an actual power dynamic. In a lot of the other scenes, it's just like 2 people talking. Shot, reverse shot. Okay, and then we're out. If you're going to make... And see, what's so confusing to me about it is that there are other times in the movie where you get this completely other structural sort of form, which is like set up a shot that looks like a painting and use that as a tableau to set the scene and move into the scene, and then you get a couple other like reverse interesting shots within that. But even when they were doing that, there were times when I was like, why did we go into the scene? Like, let's just watch the scene unfold from this tableau that is really beautiful to look at, and just be away from them. Be the observer. Like, be the fucking person who's walking through the gallery and stopping in front of a painting and just letting it play out in front of us. I don't want to get into the convention in this movie of shot, reverse shot. It's fucking annoying. It's also annoying when they don't do any dialogue overlap. So like, one person, we're on you say your thing. We cut to the reverse shot. I say my thing. We cut to the reverse shot. You say your thing. We cut to the reverse shot. I say, it's like, stop. Like, the dialogue is not what's important. How it's affecting the fucking characters is so much more important. So overlap dialogue, I don't mean overlap dialogue with each other. I mean with the shots, like be on you when I'm talking so we can see your reaction to what I'm saying. Don't wait for me to be done talking to then cut to you to have a reaction. Like there's just that's an editing thing.
Well, I think it highlights at any given point there should be the horror story that is being told. Like what are the questions at play here as far as the mystery that's being unfurled of how this horror thing works. So whenever then And you can show that through, okay, this character's reaction to listening to this piece of information at a certain time or whatever. So just like when you're describing it exactly as far as the formula of a lot of the scenes, that's what came to mind most of all when it wasn't one of who I was seeing as like the two main people. Let's say you have John Malkovich, and I think it was Gretchen, Toni Collette, it might have been Rene Russo, like scene of the two of them. And I can picture already that it's kind of has to show them walking into this building kind of thing. None of that I needed. Like just cut to the brass tacks. I mean, better yet, make it so whatever exposition is being delivered is just it's doing more thing than once. But I mean, again, I don't know. I'm just saying the same thing now as far as cutting it down to just that horror story being told.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think that there's the things that we're complaining about or criticizing, by and large, I think are the result of things not having enough time to hone in. Like, this movie feels like they had to get it done. It feels like they were maybe 2 drafts away from the really honed in draft. It feels like the editing was rushed. It feels like they suffered a bit. I mean, because there's a lot of really good art design, but then there are these shots and scenes where I'm like, wow, that's boring. This is like we had to do the TV, like super fast shooting, find a location that's, just basic so we can get it done version of things. And in this movie, that it really, really belies the point of the movie to be sitting in front of like a shrub and a gray stone wall and having a dialogue scene is like, what are we doing?
It feels almost more tragic. Like, I mean, I guess they're just tragic in different kind of ways, whether it's like a big studio movie just making like a terrible movie where it's like, why even make this? But then you have these, like I always, think of Netflix, even Amazon Studios is kind of the more like equivalent of, where the bigger studios were at in the 70s as far as giving these big budgets to whatever, to empower filmmakers that, more artists or whatever, however you distinguish that. So just, I mean, it's like a $20 million budget. It's a sizable chunk of money. I know in the scheme of things, it doesn't, in the history of budgets, it may not sound like the biggest budget, but it's big. It's a substantial chunk of change to like make this pretty specific artistic vision. And it just makes you sad to think like that a time constraint could have, well, I don't know. Cause
it makes me sad, but it does to the point. When Jake Gyllenhaal's character flips the fuck out with Rene Russo, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Or is it with Gretchen? No, it's Rene.
I don't know.
It's Rene Russo, I think. Anyway,
I forget what scene.
He has a flip out, and it is just singles on the two of them. The whole thing. And not only that, but the entire flip out, they are standing still about 10 feet away from each other. And I'm sorry, but that's for that moment, that is not enough. Mm-hmm. And so what it suggests to me is that if I were directing that scene, I would do a lot with the composition of size and dynamic of the images of the characters in the frame. Right? You utilize where the camera is to really get us, for each character, to really get us to feel the state that the two characters are in. So in this particular case, Jake Gyllenhaal is effectively powerlessness. So use the tools that we have as filmmakers to show him in the frame that suggest his powerlessness. All we get is a eye-level single of him standing with nothing behind him. It's just like white walls and like some junk in the background. That says nothing about what's going on. And so either they didn't have time to fucking figure it out, but even that, like, you don't need time to fucking just put the camera on the fucking ground or like pedestal it up higher so that he's lower in frame, or pull back away from him, or like frame him somehow within the walls of the gallery that they're in that make you go, wow, that's forced perspective. He looks weirdly small in relation to the walls around him. Or in how we never get a master to punch out to see the dynamic of where they fit in the frame in relation to each other. Have him farther away in a doorway feeling trapped, and have her in the foreground feeling big and the one who's got the fucking handle on the scene. Like, those are not these. Like, I'm not a fucking like genius expert in filmmaking. Those are really basic things. Like, just go watch Citizen Kane and you go, holy shit. Right? Like, that's been going on forever. Why is it not in this movie that is about art, is about composition? Like, I don't get it. And it really, it just bums me out, because I'm like, is it a choice to simplify it, or is it a circumstance? And neither one are working.
I think it's, I don't know if I want to say both or neither, but
sure.
But well, as far as I can see it happening, when kind of what I've already said, you just so excited to have these two actors you love doing this scene, and as far as when you're sitting there watching it, it's, you know, it's that you kind of, I'll be again, because there's like kind of what I said about Jake Gyllenhaal's character and our flaws, where we can latch on to truths, because like that's everything you said is completely true. And now what is also true is I've heard the quote that's just like, you know, you have a good actor and a good dialogue, all you need to do is just show them and, you know, make it happen. It's so it can get messy, especially when you're just kind of you know, as we all are, but, you know, don't have, you only have your limited perspective. Yeah. You know? And
no, I know. I just feel like for a writer-director that is so fucking detailed and depth of his, you know, sort of storytelling, just the things that he spends so much time layering.
Yeah.
To get what you get in this movie a bunch of the time, it just seems fucked up. It just seems wrong. It's right. Confounding to me, because I'm like,
I think I get it with looking at this compared to Nightcrawler, as far as if Nightcrawler has a sort of, as I already said, expediency to it and kind of this momentum to it. Like, that's kind of the story that you're following. That's how you're shooting it, you know, in a very clear way. So, you know, where you don't have much time, let's say, to get these beats across, you know, like you can see where his focus is and how that works effectively. So when you have this kind of pacing that can feel a little more plotting or whatever, or maybe it's like a deeper thing going on rather than an immediacy of having to pull off a heist or whatever. It's just kind of didn't take that extra effort that's you're saying that's needed, which I agree with.
Yeah.
To really show the undercurrent of the scene, to go, what is this scene about? You know, even though it may not have that active amount of suspense or action.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. There's a lot of what feels like just missed opportunities.
Yeah. I
just think about, like, I mean, I love art galleries and I love, like, exhibits. Like, that shit is just cool. It's always, I don't know, it's always pleasing to me. And the spaces that galleries often are in, or just museums in general, in particular modern art museums, like, there's something, the feeling of those spaces to me that is really exciting and just interesting. Because a lot of the time, the structure in and of itself is an art piece. And so it just feels like we didn't get that. And I'm like, why? Why not? Also, like, in a movie where the painting is coming to life, to not use the suggestion of, like, surrealism in some of the composition of your shots, even just a suggestion, like, take a famous Dali painting and use it as your model for how you set up the shots. Like, don't do, I'm not saying recreate it at all, but I'm just saying be like, okay, why does this Dolly painting evoke this feeling? And is there a time, I mean, I could think of it like the clocks one or the desert one. Like, there's a bunch of Dolly paintings where you go, man, that just feels lonely. Look at that and then take something from that when you're shooting the scene where the guy is alone. I don't mean literally alone. He's having a conversation, but he's having a flip out because he knows he's fucking alone and nobody else will listen to him. Like, that's just a fucking tool, but like to not do it seems just like a complete lapse.
It feels like you're just going to point. It's kind of ironic in a way to make a film about art and not being inspired. At least knowing that that's a place where you can take those stylistic choices from. Yeah.
I don't know. There's just
framing choices.
You know what? Part of what I'm bitching about is that it never rose to the idea of what I thought it could be, and that is so subjective.
Yeah,
it's not. Look, Dan what's his name? Doug?
Dan Gilroy.
Yeah, Dan Gilroy. Doug, yeah. Doug, no. So he may hear what I'm saying and be like, you completely missed the movie I made. And I'm not saying that what he made is wrong. I'm just saying that I don't know. I think he missed a bunch of opportunities. And maybe he didn't want to make that movie that I'm wanting. That's fine. But,
Right. And I mean, I can just sum up for me again. It was just about all the things that were there working. I think the reviews would have been a lot more positive had they been honed.
Yeah.
What was not working so much, you cut, you slice, you hone the film to those aspects that really were working.
Yeah.
Moments that were.
Oh, hey, there's your cat.
Hey, bud.
I think that since this is a horror podcast, it's important to talk briefly about. I didn't want to say this in what worked because you had said like that the kills, that the horror aspect, the curse, and sort of like people are going to die and all of that. That aspect was working for you, but it didn't work for me because of how it was set up and then played out. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not saying that you have to do this, that there's a traditional or right way to do it, but generally you get some sense of cold opening about the dead guy, right? Something early on. You know, when we meet his paintings for the first time in the movie,
it kind of came out of nowhere. I was kind of like, wait, what? Yeah. It felt all happenstantial. Like I didn't realize it was important until after it happened, you know?
It's he dies, like she finds him dead at 15 minutes into the movie. And man, did it feel like later. And that's a problem, right? So that first 15 minutes is a lot of, I mean, I'm actually just sort of scrolling through it. It's like Gyllenhaal gets to the first exhibit thing, and he kind of does the walkthrough, and then we meet Josefina, and then they have a conversation. Then we meet Rene Russo, and then we meet Gretchen. It's like we kind of meet everybody, all the players, and then at about 10 minutes in. Oh, no, a little bit more than 10 minutes. So at 11 minutes, we've met everybody. We've had a bunch of mostly two-person scenes, some of it walkthroughs, and we've established kind of who everybody is, right? 11 minutes into the movie, Gyllenhaal goes and hangs out with Josefina, and then they, like, hook up, which felt strange, okay? To me, just it structurally felt strange, or story-wise felt strange. Then We get some other stuff. We get home life stuff. And then 4 minutes after that, 15 minutes in, Josefina finds the dead body. That's cool, I guess. I think it should be earlier. It should be more like that scene where Jake Gyllenhaal and Josefina go and hook up. That's where finding the dead body, I feel like, should be more. It's around 11, 12 minutes in a 2-hour movie. So what I'm getting at is the first time we see any sort of real horror, she doesn't go into the dead guy's apartment and get the paintings until minute 20. And I guess it's following a pretty standard structural, like, beat by beat thing, like at the right quote unquote minute, like page numbers.
Right.
But like,
it wasn't highlighting it.
Exactly,
in a weird way.
exactly. I think that's really what's getting me, is that like I don't know, if the story is about, or not about, but if the MacGuffin, so to speak, is the dead guy and his story and his art, don't we need to see that earlier on somehow? Like, we go down this whole long thing of, like, his history, and, like, Gyllenhaal's writing a story about him, and, like, doing detective work, and it just, I don't know, man. It just feels, there's, like, a montage scene of him doing research.
Right.
What? That's in minute 33, 34 or something like that, when I don't know, it just, does that ever pay off in any way? There's all these mystery things that I think could be cool if that was what the story was. But then we leave that and we do this art world, like, insular, everybody's got their struggles thing going on. It just, I think what it is that, to the filmmaker's point, and your point, it's 2 movies. He tried to do Nashville, an Altman sort of style movie, and a murder mystery ghost story. And maybe that can work. Maybe those 2 things can be melded together in a way that turns into a thing that's really interesting. But in this particular case, I just felt like I was ping-ponging between 2 movies. It's like, on one screen I had Nashville, and on another screen I had Seven.
Yeah, ditto.
Not even 7. I mean, that's being way
something
generous,
with supernatural aspects, yeah.
Right, right. Like, I think part of why it doesn't work is that it doesn't know what the touchstones of the story are. Let's just say it's D's. It seems like it's trying to say that it's D's, that it's him, it's the artist and the artwork. Maybe that's not what the intention was, but let's just say that that's the way to go in this case. I definitely want to set up the suggestion of that character early on, somehow. So if it's Josefina's neighbor, I want to see her fucking somehow, I don't care even how, but cross paths.
Yeah.
Something.
Right, because I was just so like, wait, who is this artist? Why do we care? Like, kind of thing. Like could have had some cold open of him dying, just something to, like, give it a framework around this artist's powers.
She could get a piece of mail that belongs to him, and have to fucking interact with him, and, like, he cracks the door open, we never really see him, he's mysterious or whatever, but she catches a glimpse of something in the back of the apartment that she goes, whoa, you're an artist? Like, I don't know what it could be. It could be anything.
I wonder if it was because it was touching on, like, all these different characters, it made it so we weren't getting as we weren't going as deep or as nuanced as we needed to with any given
that's very
scene.
true. There is no lead in this movie, and that I actually think is a major disservice. Even in an Altman movie like Nashville, you still latch on to a couple people and you go, yeah. This is their story. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it in a while, so I can't remember who's who. But, you at least, I don't know. It just feels off. Like, Josefina dying the way she did felt off.
Right. I mean,
even Jake Gyllenhaal's character dying the way he did, I was like, okay.
I thought they were both cool as far as how they died, but as far as the sort of weight of giving them a send-off, it just felt kind of non-existent. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you couple that with somebody like trying to figure out the mystery and then having them kind of just be like the second to last death and a sort of a whatever about it, or third to last, I don't remember. I'm like, well, then who are we rooting for?
Right.
Not Rene Russo.
Right. I don't
know. So there's something off if you're going to do, I don't want to say that there are like strict rules to this, but I think that you have to at least like, when you're going to make a murder mystery, supernatural or not, to be honest, I think that you need to at least go figure out why and how the plotting of the kills and the intrigue of the mystery, why they work in a certain way. And, you know, what's the opening of Seven? Seven's an awesome movie. How does that open?
I forget.
It opens with Mills, Brad Pitt's character, coming onto a crime scene and meeting everybody for the first time. So that's actually kind of similar to this, right? The only difference is that he's coming onto a crime scene that will be the first of a number of murders that are connected. So if you make Jake Gyllenhaal the lead character and he's coming onto the scene, for one thing, everybody knows him, so that's a totally different thing. But like, whatever, it's the other end of the spectrum. But even just the suggestion of, I need to find something new, it isn't even really in that scene. And then we go down this weird, like, romance path thing that seems like the movie's going to be about their relationship, which it ends up not even being about. So I feel like I'm all over the place in this movie. Like, I don't know what to grab onto.
Isn't it funny, our critique of this movie being all over the place, and now our critique is all over the place here as a result.
Yeah.
So
no
I
shit.
feel like we've said it.
Let's wrap it up.
The very last little thing to say about what did not work. I love the title, but not for this film. It did not evoke the feel of this movie personally.
I agree, actually. I kept scratching my head about it.
I think more like when I hear Velvet Buzzsaw, kind of like synth wave, kind of punk, almost like Neon Demon more.
Sure. Oh, yes. Woo, Neon Demon. But, I love that movie so much.
Yeah. Like the title, not for this movie. Anyway, that's all for me. I'm good to move on to things of note.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure I could go on, but let's not.
All right. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
I just thought it was funny when you look at Dan Gilroy, the filmmaker's picture on Wikipedia, you go, oh yeah, that's exactly who made this movie. It just was like one of those things where it's like...
Isn't that fucked up? Like, that is just crazy that's true in life.
Yeah, I know. But it's cool as far as, He looks like he's about 7 feet tall in this picture. I don't know if that's the case, but man, he looks tall. It's just a headshot, the one that I saw.
Yeah,
but,
that's what I'm saying. Like, he
just looks like a tall man.
I mean, the camera's a little bit low on him, right? We're at like kind of mouth level, or maybe no, we're at like shoulder level, tipped up a bit, and he's a very long fellow.
Yeah. Just a fun reminder as far as like a person looking like their art. Kind of like Tim Burton looks like Tim Burton movies.
Oh, he's not that tall. He's 5'11". I'm sorry, but that picture makes him look like he's 6'8".
Funny.
Whatever.
Yeah, and then I guess the other last thing I had, it was a cool scene, much like Nightcrawler, be recognizing all the spots of my home here in LA, Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, I like that.
And like the touches, like I don't think we have an actual LAMA. Like was the it looked like it was spoofing LACMA in its aesthetics,
Yeah,
which I thought was fun.
I was confused by that too. It didn't register.
Well, like it was just the text of LAMA with like the A's being upside down V's. That just felt very LACMA, which is our museum here, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, one of the main ones, mentioning the Broad, or is it the Broad by name?
Yeah.
And then just seeing my hood, a lot of it was right here in Hollywood. It was fun. Yeah, man.
I don't know. I don't really have anything of note. Do I? Oh, God.
I just thought it was an interesting question as far as, like, would I have been more into the characters had I spent less time with them? Which I brought up during it, but I don't know how much of that is a thing we already touched on or not. But just another question. I don't know, maybe to leave us with.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of don't know what to think of this dude, of Dan.
I think we covered it. I think we broke it down pretty well as far as what Nightcrawler was doing, what this one was and wasn't doing. Oh, and it's interesting to see kind of him doing something less like gritty and yeah.
I think his resume. What am I, a fucking headhunter? His filmography is interesting to me because it's pretty all over the place, which is, I think it's cool. So just for our own interest, his first movie, these are almost all of them he wrote, not directed. Free Jack. Do you remember that movie? 1992?
No.
Free Jack. It's got Mick Jagger in it. It's bizarre, but it's cool. It's weird though. And then a movie called Chasers, which I vaguely remember, but I don't know. Two for the Money.
I'm not recognizing any of these.
Yeah, not a huge thing. The Fall, I don't remember. So
all I saw was this co-writing credit of Kong Skull Island.
That one's interesting. Real Steel, he wrote the story for. I remember liking that movie actually. It's kind of a kids movie. The Bourne Legacy he wrote. That's the I think that's the third one. And then did Nightcrawler, which was his first directorial debut.
Seems like he was just paying his dues,
Yeah, I just think it's an interesting filmography. Like I'm struck by. I kind of want to figure this guy out. Not figure him out, but he's curious to me. Anyway, he went to Dartmouth. My brother went to Dartmouth. Anyway, all right, cool. Let's move on.
Great. All right. Wrapping up Velvet Buzzsaw, seeing if we have RecommenDEADtions, which we do because we must.
That's right.
You got a RecommenDEADtion for us, Tim? Anything you've been watching, reading, eating, listening to?
I do. So there's a documentary. So have you ever heard the quote from David Mamet that there's only 5 perfect films?
No.
Whatever. I'm not going to tell you what the 5 are because I can only remember like 2 of them. But there is a documentary on one of the 5 films, and I think it's a film that you would not expect to be in a list of the 5 perfect films by David Mamet. But it's Galaxy Quest. And so there's this documentary on why Galaxy Quest is so good and what happened. Like, why is it not more renowned?
It is. Anyone I talk to loves it. And it says it's a perfect film.
But it did not do... It took until now. It took 20 years, basically.
Is this the documentary that's on Galaxy Quest? Because I saw like there was some fan documentary being made on Galaxy Quest. It's called
Never Surrender. A Galaxy Quest documentary, and I watched it on I don't remember where I watched it. Maybe Netflix? And it's just so good. And like, I'm not even sure I agree that Galaxy Quest is that great of a movie. I love it, but is it perfect? I don't know. But it's great. Let me see if it's never...
I feel like for what the movie is, you can't improve on it. I get what, even if it's not your thing, I still think it could be a perfect movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where it's streaming because I definitely streamed it. Maybe it's HBO or something. But yeah, it's really good. The documentary is really good, and it's just a reminder of like it's fun to be reminded of. I guess kind of the first time you watched that movie and you were like, "Holy shit, this is great! Why is this so good?" But it is. So yeah, that's mine. Never Surrender, a Galaxy Quest documentary.
Cool.
I love stuff like that where it's like you get to see how it came about.
Yeah, yeah.
And what it could have gone if like one actor had taken one role or another role or one decision had not happened the way it happened, you would have a totally different thing. I love that stuff. It's cool.
Getting to watch serendipity at play.
Yeah.
I mean, because like I already alluded to at the head of the episode, finding it really hard to sit down and watch Velvet Buzzsaw. I'm just feeling like I'm just doing that work of catching up on Black cinema I haven't seen or revisiting it. I just like, it's all I can think about right now is just like wanting to do the work of watching art by minorities and starting here.
Yeah.
And so just, catching up on that's so that's probably going to be all my upcoming recommendations for a while.
Why not?
Honestly, as long as, I will only be recommending them if they're good. But starting off with, I had been meaning to see some of the more recent ones. The Last Black Man in San Francisco. And that was a very, very cool film coming from the Bay Area, especially. Like, it's also one of those films that, like, I want to add to my list of films to show my director of photography, just as, like,
oh, nice.
Looks cool. Characters were great. Told a contained story, but had the kind of, opened up to the breadth and wonder and, how you can do that when you have a contained story. Good acting. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Nice.
Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Cool, dude.
So you better pull here, Tim, from our hat. You better pull Ganja and Hess as our like only I can think of black film in there.
Great. If I do that, that will be the most amazing fucking thing ever.
We have had one of those before.
I know.
I forget what it was.
Hex Day. No, or not Hex Day.
Hex Day?
No, what's it called? Hexen? Yeah.
But what was the serendipity? Oh, because one of us said, would you pull it? And then we did.
Yeah. I did not.
Okay, suspense, yeah. It's over.
I pulled Under the Skin, which was a submission by Dr. Williams.
Great. Well, honestly, this is one of those movies that I've really, really been wanting to see, and I probably wouldn't be watching now unless we had pulled it. So,
I have lots to say about this movie.
Awesome. It's like one
I read the book.
Awesome. And Tim just winked at me as he said that. So, letting you know whatever that means. He just couldn't help but wink when he said it. No, seriously, I've just only heard great things. Ryan, this will be your new favorite movie. And as soon as this went into our hat, I've been putting off watching it until now.
Nice.
So I'm really excited to see it.
Cool.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Who's Dr. Williams? Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Oh, good.
He's a friend who's actually, I've told you about him, but basically the origin as far as our format of the show and getting me to do a horror podcast, we have to thank for him.
Oh, cool.
And our movie watching days back in the day.
Doctor.
Horror movie.
What's he a doctor of?
Math.
Meth?
Math.
Oh, math.
I don't know.
Oh, it may be both.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yep.
Gotta love it.
So, until then, if you are here, we thank you for being here.
Yeah, good job.
And our big ask is if you enjoyed this, tell a friend. But I'm just saying that because we say that. So right now, I'd rather tell you to watch The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which I already told you to do.
It's we all need to. I don't know how to put this, but we gotta stand up for each other.
Can I So my joke I made, maybe this is totally out of taste, but I don't think anyone heard it. I posted it. But we know the line in Get Out of what's his face saying, "I would have voted for Obama for a third time if I could have."
Yeah.
My self-reflective quote, even though I'm here watching, movies and stuff, is I would have watched Get Out for a third time if I could have.
Yeah. Well,
I feel like that's where we're at.
That is where we're at. And,
that's good.
I think as bad as the shit is and has been, at least something's happening. I don't know if it's going to turn out better, but I'm definitely fucking glad that shit's hitting the fan in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
you can't, you turn up the heat, the water's going to boil.
For God's sake, yeah. I mean, I'm resisting. I could just go off about this stuff, so I'm actually resisting doing that. But get out there, get your voice heard. Listen, please, people, listen to the voices that need to be heard right now, and then be safe.
Yeah, and the question is, and then what else?
Yeah,
and then what else? Great. But yeah, so I think that's it. So yeah, in closing, we do mean it, and still thank you for being here.
And we will see you next time.
Goodbye.